Sometimes people say things that are untrue, but for some reason they become widely accepted as the truth, despite the facts pointing to the opposite. Over the years, as more people believe these lies, the truth gets muddier and muddier. From the creation of democracy to the discovery of America, all the way to the origins of a fall holiday. On today's top 10 list, I will be covering 10 scary lies about American history we all believed. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have democracy. Apparently, it is common for people to believe that America introduced democracy to the world, but that is just very untrue. It is true, however, that America was extremely influential in the rise of democracy. America was certainly a leader when it came to making the move from the monarchy that had been ruling in Europe for centuries to a democratic society, but America absolutely did not invent democracy. In around 507 BC, the Greeks actually had their own form of democracy, which was called democratia. This was a direct rule by the people rather than the representative democracy we have now, and it even included 3 separate branches of government. Democratia did of course have its caveats though, considering women, foreigners, and slaves were excluded, and around 85% of the population had no political rights. In our number 9 spot today, we have the light bulb. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. In school, we usually learn that Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, but that is another one of those things that is just not true. Well, it's kind of true, but it leaves out a ton of other vital information. It actually took a whole team of people, like many great scientific advancements do. While the light bulb that Edison made was patented in 1879, the invention of it starts all the way back in 1800 with Italian inventor Alessandro Volta, who was responsible for the first practical method of generating electricity, which was called the voltaic pile. After this, there was the English chemist Humphrey Davy, who created the first electric lamp by connecting those piles to charcoal electrodes. After this, there were 2 more scientists, Warren de la Rue and William Straight, who independently improved upon the designs to make them more efficient. This obviously still isn't the end, you guys. After this, Joseph Swan made the design more cost efficient, which would help it be more widely accessible, and then after this, Edison was able to improve the design further, but then, even after that, Lewis Latimer was the one who improved the design to the point where the widespread use of electricity was a popularity. This was an extremely long-winded way of saying there's a lot of people who had a hand in this, and if we're going to learn about one, we should probably learn about all of them. In our number 8 spot today, we have the round earth. If there are any flat earthers out there watching this video, you might want to skip over this one. There's a common belief that Christopher Columbus was the one who proved that the earth is round, but that is simply just untrue. It is highly likely that he never thought that the earth was flat at all. We've known the world was round long before the days of Christopher Columbus. So far back that the first written document we have noting the knowledge of the world being round dates back to the 5th century, as it was written by Greek philosophers. This knowledge goes back even further though, as it actually stems from the 3rd century BC, as astronomers even calculated the Earth's circumference back then. So I think it's safe to say that Christopher Columbus is certainly not responsible for this discovery. In our number 7 spot today, we have the discovery of America. While we're on the topic of things Christopher Columbus didn't discover, let's talk about America. It has been widely believed for a long time that Christopher Columbus discovered America, but that is very obviously not true at all. First of all, let's start off with the simple fact that there were already people living there. How could you discover something that's already been found? Secondly, the first European to find North America is believed to be Leif Erikson, and this happened 500 years before Columbus. And lastly, Columbus didn't even make it to North America at all. He set out on a voyage to the Western Hemisphere and landed in the Caribbean islands and Central and South America. In our number 6 spot today, we have where slavery existed. Apparently, it is believed by some people that America only had slavery in the South, but that is extremely untrue. While the southern states certainly had some of the largest populations of slaves and also saw most of the revolts, slavery existed in all parts of the US. Massachusetts was actually the first known colony to legalize slavery. While it was beginning to gradually end in the northern states, New York passed a gradual emancipation law in 1799, which basically just kept younger slaves under ownership until they reached adulthood. And all the way in 1830, there were still 75 slaves living in New York, York, and it was still another full decade after that until the last slave was finally freed. So yeah, slavery was certainly not a thing that was only seen in the South. In our number 5 spot today, we have the witch trials. Most of us have heard of the Salem witch trials, but if you haven't, they were the trials and prosecution of people who were accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts from 1692 to 1693. These trials were particularly gruesome as there were 200 people accused and 30 of them, mainly women, were found guilty. 5 of those 30 were jailed and the rest were very sadly executed. This is the deadliest witch hunt ever in North America, and it is certainly one of America's most well-known cases of mass hysteria, as all of these accusations were of course false. There's a weird theory that has become pretty common that originated in 1976. This theory is that rye ergot, which is a fungus that can cause hallucinations, was in the bread that was being produced by the people who lived in Salem. So this would lead the theory to speculate that ergot poisoning is what caused these trials, as people were hallucinating these supernatural events. Well, many historians and medical professionals have claimed that this theory is very inaccurate. This theory is simply just speculation and is truly based in no evidence at all. These trials, however, were a clear sign of the dangers of isolationism, religious extremism, false accusations, and lapses in due process. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Model T. The Model T is a legendary car that put Henry Ford on the map, considering he is the incredible inventor, and while some people believe that Henry is the inventor of the automobile, that isn't exactly true. Steam-powered vehicles have roots all the way back in 1769, but it wasn't until the 19th century that we would see gasoline-powered automobiles. In 1887, Carl Benz, who was a German engineer, was responsible for this invention, and this is when production vehicles began appearing. The Model T was created in 1908, and this is when it became the first automobile to become mass-produced on an assembly line. So the Model T certainly shaped the automobile industry, but it was by no means the first automobile. In our number 3 spot today, we have the stock market crash. The stock market crash of 1929 is still remembered as one of the worst economic events in our history. It was an undoubtedly horrible time that caused a lot of financial damage for years to come. There's a very dark myth surrounding this economic crash, however, but today we will talk about the truth. This myth is that the crash was so terrible there was an unparalleled amount of people taking their own lives by jumping from high-rise buildings. This myth is believed to have stemmed from Winston Churchill, as he recounted someone jumping from the 16th floor of a hotel on the morning of Black Thursday. But this incident happened hours before the crash, so there is certainly no proof that these two events were correlated. This was then exacerbated after a newspaper columnist, Will Rogers, wrote that men were jumping to their demise so quickly that you had to stand in line to get a window to jump out of. Well, this certainly isn't true, as there were only 2 records of people taking their own lives that day. Although that is certainly too many, it's not exactly the picture it was painted out to be. It is thought that 100 people took their lives that year, and in the following years the rate continued to rise. As it turns out, 1932 was a much more deadly year in that category than 1929 was. In our number 2 spot today, we have Thanksgiving. So everything we're taught about Thanksgiving is a lie. Well, that is if you were taught that we celebrate it because the story originates from a big feast that European settlers had with indigenous Americans. That didn't really happen that way at all. This little feel-good story was created a little over a century ago, and while it was based in actual happenings, the truth is significantly more grim. There isn't necessarily an agreed-upon happening that began the Thanksgiving tradition, but there's a few historical events that are believed to possibly be the beginning. One happened in 1619 when settlers in Berkeley Hundred in Virginia decided to celebrate their arrival annually. A more grim origin story comes from 1637 when there was a big celebratory feast that took place. This feast was put on by Massachusetts colony governor John Winthrop, as he wanted to celebrate colonial soldiers who just returned from slaughtering hundreds of Pequot people. So yeah, it certainly isn't the holiday we all think of it as. In our number 1 spot today, we have the end of slavery. The 13th Amendment and the Civil War are sometimes regarded as the ending of slavery in America, but there is a pretty obvious loophole that we are all looking over. The 13th Amendment still allowed forced labor as a punishment for crime. Okay, not necessarily a fantastic rule, but then if you just stay out of trouble, it shouldn't be an issue, right? Well, obviously not right, as thousands and thousands of black people living in America now found themselves being basically kidnapped off the streets and accused of committing crimes, or accused of committing absurdly vague crimes such as vagrancy. They would then be issued fines that they would not be able to pay, which would end up with them getting sold to businesses to work in mines or timber yards or on farms or railroads. And these working conditions certainly were no better than the conditions of slavery. So while the 13th Amendment absolutely should have been the end of forced slavery in America, it absolutely was not. It was just hidden in a different package. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. If you already knew any of these, please let me know down below in the comments. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Democratia did of course have its caveats. Hair in my eye. Democratia. I hope I'm saying this right. Am I saying this wrong? I'm looking it up. Democratia. Yeah. Okay. In colonial Massachusetts from, I almost said from 1962. Yeah, it happened that recently. Imagine, you guys. Okay. This theory is that rye ergot, is that how you say that? Ergot pronunciation. Ergot. Thank God I looked that up. Ergot. Okay. So this would lead the theory to speculate that ergot. But it wasn't until the 19th century that we would see petrol. How do you say that? I'm just gonna say gasoline. Petrol. Fuck. That's a regular word and I literally have no idea how to pronounce it.